Hello everybody, I'm Novi and welcome back to the channel. Whenever a team wins something, the stars are always the ones to get the most attention. Positions like quarterbacks in the NFL, guards in the NBA, or even drivers in NASCAR if you're into that sort of thing. They're always the first to get the praise and attention from the fans and the media alike because they're usually the most popular. But winning takes more than just your most popular players. It requires your team as a whole to be great. LeBron could have been argued as the best player in basketball for years and years and years, but he didn't win the championship every single year. This same sentiment rings true when it comes to pro wrestling too, with your Bryan Danielsons of the world always getting universal love, while the people I'm going to talk about in this video always seem to get underappreciated for what they do. So today, we're going to shine a light on all of those guys and talk about some of the most underrated wrestlers in AEW. Before we do get into it though, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for live streams every Wednesday before Dynamite and new videos just like these every single Saturday, always doing one thing, talking graps. To start off, I want to talk about a guy who's stuck as a tag wrestler when I think we all know he could ball on his own if he was given the chance. Anthony Bowens. Throughout the Acclaim's runs as both tag and trios champions, Bowens was the only reason to tune into any of their matches. Compared to anyone in the ring, he's really good, but compared to Max Caster and modern Billy Gunn, he looks like the best to ever do it out there. He's extremely athletic, is really smooth in the transition and working the technical game, and is also extremely charismatic both inside and outside the ring. When it comes to the former, he works the crowd so well with his great selling ability and solid offense. And the latter, if you've heard him talk, you know that he speaks with this energy that you don't find everywhere in wrestling. It's because of this that I feel like in a lot of the Acclaim's matches as a tag team, you can just tell that Bowens is destined for more after their run is over. He has that it factor about him, and while I understand some people's fears when it comes to him developing a character, I personally don't share them because I think no matter what, character or not, his charisma is good enough to get him through. I really hope we get the Bowens singles run sooner rather than later, because I think I can speak for all of us when I say the Acclaimed as an act has run its course and it did so long ago. But also because it's really easy to see all the potential he has in him for a standout run on his own. Next up on the list is an underrated women's talent in AEW, Emi Sakura. Emi has been around in the wrestling business for a long time and has trained a lot of the best modern Joshi talent. Two of her most notable trainees are also in AEW, in Riho and Hikaru Shida. She really is a true veteran of the game, and her matches are very reminiscent of that. In a promotion that has long been affected by inconsistent women's wrestling, Emi has always been a reliable good match generator. She always just looks so comfortable in there, which is a given because she's been working for 28 years, but still, it's incredibly impressive just how reliable she is, no matter the style her opponent is working. She always adapts to whatever they need her to do, whether that's a little bit of comedy or serious main event wrestling. It doesn't matter. Something I want to point out as well is just how many great matches she's had in AEW. Of the 10 highest rated AEW women's matches on Cage Match, she's in 3 of them, 2 in the top 5. I think her high level stuff is pretty often overlooked when people think about her run. She's really been great when she's been put in those big spots. I particularly remember her match with Jamie Hayter on Rampage being a moment where everybody kind of realized, hey, Emi Sakura is really good. Emi is simply one of the most influential talents of the modern era, whether that's as a promoter, trainer, or wrestler. And in AEW, she's always stood out as someone to pay attention to whenever her match graphics pop up, because even this deep into her career, she's as good as she ever has been. I hope she continues to put on great matches in AEW whenever she's over here, and I truly hope she gets her queen moment at Wembley at All In this year, because for the legend she is, she deserves it. For the next pick, I think we go back to the tag division, but for a team as a whole, the Guns. I understand some of you may hear that name and think that I'm crazy, but let me explain. Off rip, I am going to admit, the Guns aren't particularly great when it comes to in-ring stuff. They can struggle with transitioning from spot to spot, their control segments can sometimes drift, and they're not the cleanest guys ever every time out there. With that being said, they never look lost in there and are very serviceable as a team. They're good enough to let what really puts them over a lot of other teams in this division shine through, their charisma. In the ring, their movements just have this sense of personality to them that really exemplifies who their characters are. It's fluidly silly and goofy in a way that's super endearing and also super unique to them. They can also pull some great expressions and know how to really sell a moment for the cameras. That praise can also be applied to their out-of-ring stuff, where in promos they're absolutely hilarious to me. They're like kind of nuts and just always very goofy in a way that I just love, and I think they really do play their role in the Bang Bang Gang to perfection. But they are also former tag champs too, which is something I do want to touch on for a second. I think it's very clear, and it was then, but it's even more so now, that they won those belts way too early into their career. I mentioned earlier some of the ways that they're still green now, but back then, they were so super green. And I think that's why some people might take issue with their inclusion on this list. They built up a reputation of not being the best workers because I think they were just overpushed. But I honestly think they have a lot of the unteachable stuff down just to a T. And in the ring, if they can shore some things up, I think they have so much potential. Hopefully over the course of the Trios Champs run they're on now, they can show a lot of these things to the wider audience. Because in their current role, they fit so well, and I think it's time for them to shed that reputation they built all that time ago. Next, let's go with the most underrated big man in AEW, Lance Archer. I think first and foremost, something people really don't realize when it comes to Lance is that he's nearly 50 years old. The guy's been wrestling for 23 years, and for a big man his age, it's insane he can still go like he can. While not super athletic or anything like that, he still has a very surprising pep in his step that I think a lot of other people his size lose much earlier in their careers. Something I love about him as a wrestler too is how his gimmick Everybody Dies influenced the way he works. He's an imposing threat, and every time he comes out there, you should probably be scared because, you know, everybody dies. Outside the ring too, I remember when he would just hurl guys into the ceiling a while back. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. He knows what he is and plays that role perfectly in pretty much every aspect of his game. He's the guy who loses entertaining feuds to main event guys to either shoot them up the card or elevate their title runs. His best two matches in the Texas Deaths against Hangman Page and Jon Moxley do just that. Of course, those guys are two of the best at those kinds of matches, but Lance absolutely did his thing there and made both guys look like $1,000,000, which is what he's always done, and I think now, that's the role he's best at. And honestly, guys like that are what make wrestling TV work. The kinds of wrestlers who always do their job above and beyond, and makes everyone around them look so good. One day, people will look back at Lance Archer in AEW and appreciate that aspect of him even more, because it's like I said, that's what makes wrestling TV work. For all he's done and all the guys he's elevated during his time in AEW, I think he's severely underrated when people think about, what makes this thing go. He always does exactly what's asked of him to the best of his ability, and I think that's what makes him so underrated. Let's head back to the women's division for my next underrated talent, Serena Deeb. I think even still, after she's put on some great performances in her matches, the wider AEW audience still underrates her in-ring work. She's a fantastic technical wrestler and easily the best in the division. The way she moves from hold to hold is so graceful, and her execution on each of them is flawless. Her issue has obviously never been her in-ring. It's always been the stuff outside of it. She doesn't have the most charisma or anything, but I think her promos are actually kind of underrated. She says what she needs to say with conviction and a belief in herself that I think fits the Professor character. Just look back at some of her segments when she returned earlier this year. In those segments, I think it was so easy to be empathetic towards her, and I think in her feud with Tony, if she was a face, more people would rate her promo ability. Even still though, I don't really ever think she'll be the face of the division just as an all-around wrestler, but I really think that a title run should absolutely be in the cards for her at some point. She's just too good to never hold gold in AEW, and I honestly think that she will someday, because at some point, her skill in the ring just can't be denied. Taking our third and final trip to the tag division, we have the Workhorsemen. This is an addition to the list I added right after their match on Collision, where in just shy of 10 minutes, they got the crowd completely invested in them as an act. And I think the reason people don't really cheer them from the start is because they don't really have a place on AEW TV, meaning most people at the shows are seeing them for the first time and don't really know who they are. But then in their chairs, they see this big ass dude in JD Drake hit a moonsault off the top rope, and who's not gonna pop at that? But honestly, it's not even just those feats that get them over, it's their really solid work as a tag team. They don't always do the flashiest stuff, but I think everyone can appreciate just good wrestling. And the Workhorsemen always deliver on that front, and they give their all every single time they're out there. I think at the very least, they deserve a role on the TV. because at this point, I don't think you can look past the reactions they get whenever they are given a chance. They should be the backbone of the tag division if we're being real, and I think every time they get over like they did on Collision, they move closer and closer to that role, which is a role I think they'd excel at. For my last underrated talent on the list, we have Chicken, Mark Briscoe. Obviously, we can't talk about Mark without mentioning his brother Jay, who tragically lost his life over a year ago now. It still seems like yesterday when I was scrolling Twitter just seeing everyone reminisce on how the Briscoes as a team impacted them, sharing so many stories of watching the brothers over the years. It's a moment I'll never forget when I think about my wrestling fandom, because it was one of the few times that everyone came together to just share all these great memories of, by all accounts, a great man's life. I, like everybody else, still wish we could have seen the Briscoes on AEW TV because they were incredible, and I have no doubt they would have translated so seamlessly to TV. I think when it comes to that transition too, people had their reservations when it comes to Mark being a singles guy. Jay was always widely considered to be the better singles wrestler of the two after all, but I think I can say with absolute certainty after everything Mark's done, he proved everyone that thought that very wrong. Mark just has this infectious energy about him when he wrestles that never fails to get me invested in whatever he's doing. And it's not just me he gets with him, he always gets the live crowds to cheer along no matter what he's doing. Luckily enough, we got to see him really shine in the Continental Classic, where in a tournament full of hoopers, he stood out as particularly great. Every match of his, I thought he brought his everything. He brought every ounce of energy he had. He was taking the nastiest bumps and throwing himself around the ring just because, and it always got me. I think looking back, he was probably my favorite guy to watch throughout the entire tournament besides Danielson, even though he only won one match. He didn't even need to win, because there's not very many wrestlers out here that can make you feel like Mark Briscoe does. And honestly, there's no wrestler on earth that makes me feel the feelings that Mark Briscoe makes me feel. I'm really glad he got to win the ROH World title on Supercard of Honor earlier this year, because he did it on the anniversary of Jay Briscoe's first ROH World title win 11 years prior. But also because I think Mark deserves it for all the work he's put in since becoming a part of AEW proper. That was one of the best, most heartwarming moments in wrestling all year, and not one that I'll soon forget. I think even though people love Mark Briscoe, there's no doubt about that, he's still underrated for just how special of a talent he is. To put it simply, there's nobody like Mark Briscoe, and there never will be ever again. And with that, that's gonna do it for today's video, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to comment down below who you think are the most underrated talents in AEW, or just add on to what I've said about the names here. And while you're down there, leave a like on the video, it really helps me out, and subscribe to the channel as well. On the subscribe part too, I want to take a second to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for 1,000 subscribers. When I was a kid, I'd always say I wanted to be a YouTuber, and because of you guys, you're making my dreams come true. It truly does mean the world to me that so many of you guys enjoy my content because I just love making it. I love sharing in my love of Graps with all of you. So thank you guys all for being here and supporting the channel in any way that you have, whether that's liking, commenting, it doesn't matter. Whatever you did, thank you so much. With that being said, it's been Novi. Much love to you all. Peace.